Hello, and welcome to The Nature of Healing, a podcast in time that is all about exploring the many facets of healing. I'm your host, Jen Shepherd, and I'm excited to be here today with you as we dive into the world of healing. This podcast is produced by Bolts of Love, and at The Nature of Healing, we believe that healing is not just a process, but a movement, a recognition of love in any situation, whether it be physical, emotional, spiritual, or mental. Each episode is a chat on another way to approach healing for ourselves and our communities. So sit back, relax, and join us as we explore the nature of healing together.
Gather round, friends near and far. Welcome here, the nature of healing where we are. In tune with the earth, feel it move, feel it shift. Under twilight skies, let's all get lost adrift. Mystic winds blow that cosmic dust. Ancient voices, they scream and they rust. From the roots to the stars, we connect this land. Hands to the soil, hearts in the handstand. Healing in the wind, in the whisper of the pine, in the howl of the wolf, in the flow of the wine. Come on, gather closer, feel this heartbeat strong. In this circle of life we all belong. Cracks in the pavement, veins of the street. Watch it grow through the stones, bearing heat. Healing the wounds of a world so torn. In the silence before the storms pour. Oceans crashing, breaking chains of time. Mountains echo where the rebels climb. Through the pain, through the strain comes the birth anew. We rise from the ashes in skies cerulean blue. Healing in the wind, in the whisper of the pine, in the howl of the wolf, in the flow of the wine. Come on, gather closer, feel this heartbeat strong. In this circle of life we all belong. Healing in the wind, in the whisper of the pine, in the howl of the wolf, in the flow of the wine. Come on, gather closer, feel this heartbeat strong. In this circle of life we all belong.
Ocean, hearing the whisper of the pine, in the howl of the wolf, in the flow of the wine. Come on, gather closer, feel this heartbeat strong. In this circle of life we all belong.
I was in a discussion recently, and we were asked to contemplate and interpret and define the divine. Big conversation. And what does that even mean? And what does it mean to have experiences with divine? Which got me to thinking about all the times I've heard people talk about their experiences. And when they felt lost in desperate situations and they're praying and they feel like their prayers have been answered, or sometimes they feel like their prayers have not been answered. Either one is their experience with divine. My father would recount frequently a time when At the time, we lived on a road that had a blind curve to the left if you went out. So we always were told to go the other way unless it was nighttime, because at nighttime you could see lights. So it was deemed more safe to go out that way at night. And he did that one night and saw no headlights coming, went to keep going, and his car stopped. He said he doesn't remember stopping it, but the car stopped, and past him went a car flying without headlights with a cop car right behind it. And he would have been smashed all over the road. And he attributed that to a guardian angel. That was his experience of divine. One person recounted to me their walk in the woods one day, and while they felt particularly connected, they felt they saw what they called faeries in the trees and on the ground and around them as their experience of divine. A few weeks before my husband passed, he swore up and down that he saw a golden fairy hanging above my head one night as I slept. And that was his experience of connection. Also, when my husband was sick, there was a presence, I'm just going to call it more right now, and I'll explain that more as we go on in this talk. But we were told that he had to go into hospice. And at that moment, it felt like there was a huge shift in the room. And at the time, I had no other word for it than a feeling of an angel. And this past, was it 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, when I went to conference, there were many spiritual leaders there trying to find words in small groups for their non-physical experiences, which was fascinating because they're like, I've never tried to put this into words before. And there are spiritual leaders trying to find words for what it meant for their own personal experiences with other, with divine, with their interaction, with all of that. Reverend John White was a spiritualist minister. He served at Lilydale for over 40 years. He was my friend, and in many ways, he was a bit of a life coach at the time that I knew him, and we started hanging out together. He believed firmly that if you wanted to get better at something that you were interested in, or you would hang around the people that were doing it well. So he invited me to hang around him because I was recognizing him as one of those people. He understood that people in a way that I had not seen someone understand people. He had compassion. He was always trying to improve himself. And he was aware of group politics and organizational politics without being part of the drama. He was really, really good at that. So he invited me on with him at a time when organizational politics were working against me in a way that I didn't understand. I was very oblivious to a group of spiritual people being mean to each other, especially behind their backs. I did not understand it at all. He understood something I did not and invited me to leave one group and go play with his group instead. He said, you'll be able to accomplish everything you want to accomplish. It'll take you longer, but it'll be better. So on that trust, that's where I went. And because of that, I was able to join him on work things that he did for other people, including Sunday nights. He called them Sunday night circles, where he would guide people through an experience, and then they would share that experience, what they thought about it with each other. He would draw crowds and crowds. So there must have been 70 people in the room the night that I'm going to talk about. And after he took everybody through this experience to receive insight and guidance about one's own life and have some type of exchange, he asked people to share with each other what their experience was. I've been through exercises like this before. I've been through exercises like this since. And it always amazes me on how I don't have the experience other people have. So the people around me in class were talking about hearing from guides and angels and ancestors and bright lights and totems and master teachers and all the things that they were talking about. So I started getting a tiny bit frustrated. I'm like, what are they talking about? Not my experience. So when they all left, John and I had a conversation. And I said, I basically asked them, what is up with me that I have a very lovely experience. I'm very peaceful in it, but it's not the story that these other people are coming up with. And he explained how some people don't have any other way to decode that energy and that presence. So our systems are geared to take on whatever it is, and then our brains, depending on our experience at the time, share with us what that experience is. So we have senses, right? And even in the non-physical, our senses are at work, and our brains get as close as it can to our knowledge, to sharing what that is. It creates a picture for us and a perception, just like the rest of life. But now we're talking about the non-physical. I didn't need to decode it that way. So he's like, you're not broken. It's just, you don't need to say something else is having that experience with you. You're having that experience directly. And that's the way it's being translated for you. What's interesting is it doesn't matter. Everybody's perception at the time is okay. But it's recognizing that it's the perception at the time. And sometimes looking into that and being really truthful with ourselves. Because if we go to another part of the world, they're not going to see angels. And yet it'd be the same divine, right? They're translating that experience very differently than an angel. I have some teachers that go to Buddhist countries and they work with them and they teach and they do lovely inner faith kind of things. And they said if they were to mention the word angel, they would all get up and leave because that's not their experience. And yet they're able to have an exercise like this, have the same kind of experience, but they're decoding their experience very, very based on where they live and their backgrounds and all the things. It's really uncomfortable sometimes to realize that and to grow up our perceptions. Joe Dispenza says, if we have grown accustomed to feeling unworthy, we want to continue feeling that way because we are a neurochemical habit of being unworthy. And here's the question. Are we recognizing a guide, an angel, a master teacher as our voice because there's a sense of unworthiness and not getting them direct? Could be true, could not. We all have to decide. But it goes further than that in our everyday life. Are we willing to rearrange our perceptions about things, even though it feels uncomfortable, and do that work? So I'm not saying that there aren't individualized aspects of the one. There totally is, right? In the non-physical, there must be, or my mediumship wouldn't, right? There must be some kind of that. But I do understand that in making sense of our experiences and our brains coming up with the best explanation it can, it might not be the most accurate one in the long run. In the work of Ken Wilber, he refers to the experience of understanding more as a wake-up moment. So when we have these exchanges, they're a wake-up moment. And we can only perceive and understand our wake-up moment from our place of development. So for example, if I go back to when I'm 6 years old and I lost a tooth and I place that tooth under my pillow, the following day, the tooth is gone and there's a coin or a treat in its place. And at 6 years old, I am convinced that the tooth fairy arrived in the night and left me a present. At 10 years old, I go through my parents' room to find a hair tie, and I come across a little envelope with my name on it with a bunch of little teeth. And at this moment, I start to realize and reformulate that perception of tooth fairy into, oh, that was my parents all along, into a closer truth of what's happening. So in a nutshell, Ken Wilber's integral theory, he said the willingness to move to a more accurate perspective becomes our growing up moment. He uses the words growing up. And growing up also entails cleaning up, which is the healing aspect of our journey. So it's the part that says we understand that staying stagnant is the easy bit. To stay there, to say that there is more, to push ourselves to do the introspection, the healing, and the shadow work, to revisit what we thought we knew, or maybe what we didn't know, and reinterpret it in the light of new information, takes a lot of courage and a lot of conviction. My 10-year-old self could have been like, well, why is the tooth fairy putting the teeth here? Instead of, oh, it's my parents. See? But we must be ready for a sense of loss when we change these behavior patterns, whether with ourselves, with others, or within ourselves. Our bodies have a rush of chemicals when we use our familiar neural pathways. And it feels like loss when we don't get that. It's the same thing as grief, right? When that person that we are used to being around all the time is no longer there with that input, our brain has to readjust, right? It's the same with any kind of readjustment and loss. And this can trigger urges and impulses and thoughts in our bodies seeking that dose of regular, right? Of what it always knows. And it can activate an inner dialogue, or what the literature calls the committee. And instead of getting that chemical fix in our brain from our interactions or even our non-physical recognitions, we get it by reverting to our old habits and our old ways of thinking, because it's more comfortable, because that's what our brain is used to. And here's the click. We can be misled by thoughts that say, this just doesn't feel right. I have to listen to my gut, or I need to honor my feelings and inner guidance. We can be misled by those thoughts because this inner guidance can masquerade as the proper guidance, but it's actually our body trying to stop that discomfort of our brains. So I mentioned the time that the doctor said that we needed to go to hospice, that there was nothing else medicine could do, and that I felt a shift in the doctor's office. And I was aware in that shift of a safety and a well-being, which seems really contradictory for hearing words like, it's time to call hospice. There was a sense of wisdom and knowing that this was okay and the correct action. And there was a strength to saying, we can do this. And there was also a rush of, the only thing I can call is compassion. But it came from the inside out, not the outside in. And I had no way to translate any of that at the time, other than what I started calling it the angel ethereal. Because after my husband went to bed that night, I typed in to the lovely search engine everything that I had felt in that moment, right? So I was trying to understand. And on my screen came an artist's rendition of the angel ethereal. So I'm like, wow, then I must not have made up the experience, because there's an artist that says those feelings look like that. So we're okay. Here's the thing, I never saw the angel though. Never saw it. I convinced myself in trying to understand that situation, that image on my computer screen must have been there since search engine said that's those feelings. I did have the feelings, the feelings that were powerful and safe and compassionate. And the previous 2 years' events kind of faded into that exact moment as didn't matter. The moment in itself is what mattered. I was not ready at all in that moment to know that in that moment, my internal self shifted into an awareness of my divine self. Now, as I continued my journey years later and my continued practice and study, my interpretation of that moment today is vastly different. I know in those memories that it was from the inside out. That I knew already, and yet I outsourced it to something else, right? Because what am I to feel all that from the inside out in a moment of that kind of crisis? It has to be something on the outside in helping. And yet, no, it really was from the inside out. The shift of recognizing divinity of myself in the midst of something very, very human and being able to be both at the same time. And we all have that. We all have that compassionate space that flows, especially in discomfort. Yes, we need to honor our boundaries for our own human experience, but it's pushing the limits of what those boundaries are telling us. Are they true boundaries so that we can grow and move and express? Or are they boundaries so that we continue to feel comfortable in our experience only and negate the growth? Are we willing to keep reinterpreting our divinity and how that expresses to us? And then to share it. I give the spiritual leaders that had never ventured into that area before that I listened to a few weeks ago a lot of credit for even being willing to try to figure out what it is that they were feeling and to put words to it. And then my hope and my wish and my prayer for them is they keep reinterpreting it. It took me several years to reinterpret what I felt at that moment. But it's worthwhile because you become stronger and you can certainly do more and share more. Amid each life, there are times to act and react. There are moments to stay the course and moments in which to listen and simply be. Above all, a call to the internal connection with our internal divine intelligence exists. The more. This aspect of self is the human companion to divinity and divinity itself. We are always now, more than ever, in a unique position to show up as divine in our choices, how we build community, and the decisions we make about cooperation and collaboration. In this way, we choose to listen or not listen. In a world where larger-than-life figures vie for attention and claim the right to be right, we represent the consciousness of what is possible. Our actions, our inactions, our voices, our lack thereof, our votes, our non-votes, all reflect our devotion to the sacredness of all life, emotional, physical, and spiritual. Today, we affirm the 3 C's of unconditional love: cooperation, collaboration, and caring. They will carry us further than any name-calling or hatred or violence. It's the little things, the tiny gestures that spread love, and the deliberate choices to be the light in the darkness that change us, our communities, and the world.